Moses Malone. If we're being completely honest, Moses Malone might be the most underrated superstar in NBA history. Seriously. This man won 3 MVP awards, the same number as Magic Johnson. More than Shaq, more than Kobe, more than Kevin Durant, more than Stephen Curry. Yet somehow, younger fans rarely bring him up. Moses played from 1974 to 1995 and finished his career with over 29,000 points and nearly 18,000 rebounds. Those numbers are insane. At his peak, he was basically a rebounding machine mixed with a scoring monster. His greatest season came in 1983 when he led Philadelphia to a championship and famously predicted the team's playoff run would go faux because he expected them to sweep every series. They almost did. What hurts Moses historically is that he played during the same era as Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Those two became the faces of the NBA. Meanwhile, Moses quietly dominated everybody. Today, he rarely gets mentioned despite being one of the greatest centers ever. Alex English. When people talk about elite scorers from NBA history, most fans immediately mention Jordan, Kobe, Wilt, and Kareem. But somehow Alex English often gets left out, which is crazy, because English actually scored more points than any player in the entire NBA during the 1980s. Not Bird, not Magic, not Jordan, Alex English. Think about that. He was an 8-time All-Star and one of the smoothest scorers basketball has ever seen. The problem? He played for the Nuggets. Denver wasn't a glamour franchise. They rarely got national attention, and English wasn't loud. He wasn't controversial, he wasn't flashy, he simply scored buckets every night. As time passed, people slowly forgot just how dominant he was. George Gervin, before Kevin Durant, before Tracy McGrady, before Carmelo Anthony, there was George Gervin, the Iceman. One of the coolest nicknames ever, and one of the smoothest scorers in basketball history. Gervin won 4 scoring titles and averaged over 26 points per game for his career. His finger roll became one of the most iconic moves basketball had ever seen. The crazy thing is that younger fans barely know him. Why? Because he never won a championship, and because most of his career happened before the NBA exploded globally. If Gervin played today, social media would be obsessed with him. Elvin Hayes. Elvin Hayes is another player who almost never gets mentioned anymore, despite having one of the greatest careers ever. 12-time All-Star, NBA champion. Over 27,000 career points, over 16,000 rebounds, and one of only a handful of players to rank near the top all-time in both categories. Hayes was incredibly durable. He played nearly every game for years. Yet when people discuss all-time great power forwards, names like Duncan, Malone, Barkley, and Nowitzki dominate the conversation. Elvin Hayes gets left behind. That's unfortunate because he was one of the most productive players the league has ever seen. Bernard King. At his peak, Bernard King was one of the most unstoppable scorers on earth. Younger fans, who only look at career numbers, don't realize how dominant he was. During the mid-1980s, King was averaging nearly 33 points per game. Defenders couldn't stay in front of him. Double teams didn't matter. He could score from almost anywhere. Then disaster struck. A devastating knee injury changed everything. King eventually came back and still had some great seasons, but he was never quite the same player. Because injuries interrupted his prime, many modern fans never fully appreciate how incredible he really was. Bob McAdoo. Bob McAdoo is one of the weirdest forgotten legends ever. The guy won an MVP, led the league in scoring 3 times, made 5 straight All-Star teams, and averaged over 30 points per game during his peak years. That sounds like someone we'd constantly discuss today. Yet somehow McAdoo gets almost no attention. Part of the reason is that he spent his best years on teams that didn't make deep playoff runs. Later, he became more of a role player and won championships with the Lakers. Because his career had so many different phases, people often forget how dominant he was during his prime. Dave Cowens. If Effort had a Hall of Fame wing, Dave Cowens would have his own section. Cowens won M5P in 1973. He led the Celtics to multiple championships. He played center despite often being undersized, and he brought non-stop energy every single night. The reason he's forgotten is simple. his game wasn't flashy. There weren't huge highlight reels, no viral moments, no social media clips, just relentless basketball. Those kinds of players often get overlooked as time passes. Adrian Dantley. Adrian Dantley may be one of the greatest scorers nobody talks about anymore. This man averaged 30 points per game in 4 different seasons. 4. That's incredibly rare. He was an offensive machine. Strong, efficient, crafty, almost impossible to guard one-on-one. The problem is that Dantley played during an era loaded with superstar scorers. Bird, Magic, Jordan, Gervin, Moses, Isaiah. There were simply too many huge names. As a result, Dantley slowly faded from public memory, despite being one of the most efficient scorers ever. Sidney Moncrief. Today's NBA loves two-way players. Guys who dominate offensively while locking people up defensively. Well, Sidney Moncrief was doing that decades ago. Moncrief won the first 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards ever given out. Think about that. The very first 2. He was also a 5-time All-Star and one of the best guards in basketball throughout the 1980s. Unfortunately, he spent most of his career in Milwaukee. Small market stars often get forgotten faster than stars from New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago. Moncrief became one of the biggest victims of that reality. Mark Price. Ask older NBA fans about Mark Price and they'll immediately start smiling. Ask younger fans and many won't know who he is, which is wild. Price was one of the best shooters of his era. A 4-time All-Star, a member of some incredible Cleveland teams, and one of the original point guards who combined elite shooting with elite playmaking. Many basketball historians actually view him as one of the players who helped pave the way for modern guards like Stephen Curry. But because injuries shortened his peak and Cleveland never won a title, Price slowly disappeared from mainstream conversations. Connie Hawkins. Connie Hawkins might have one of the most fascinating stories in basketball history. Many older players believed Hawkins was one of the most talented players they'd ever seen. But because of a gambling scandal he wasn't actually involved in, he was effectively blacklisted from the NBA for years. By the time he finally got his chance, some of his best basketball years were already gone. Even then, he still became an ABA superstar and later an NBA Hall of Famer. Imagine how famous he'd be if his prime years weren't taken away. Today he's largely forgotten, despite influencing generations of players. Tiny Archibald. This guy accomplished something that still sounds impossible. In the 1972-73 season, he led the NBA in both scoring and assist, not just one, both. To this day, almost nobody has ever matched that level of offensive responsibility. Archibald eventually won a championship with the Celtics and made 6 All-Star teams. Yet somehow, he almost never appears in modern basketball debates. Part of that is because he was only 6'1". Part of it is because he played before the NBA's television explosion. And part of it is simply because time moves on. But make no mistake, Tiny Archibald was an absolute superstar. Spencer Haywood. If you know NBA history, then you know Spencer Haywood was much more than just a great player. He literally changed basketball forever. Before Haywood, players basically had to wait several years before entering professional basketball. Haywood challenged that system in court and won a landmark Supreme Court case that eventually helped open the door for underclassmen to enter the NBA early. That's a massive part of basketball history. But somehow, hardly anyone talks about him, and the crazy thing is that his actual playing career was incredible too. Yeah, Haywood was a 4-time All-Star, a scoring champion, an ABA MVP, an Olympic gold medalist, and one of the best power forwards of the 1970s. At his peak, he was averaging nearly 30 points and 13 rebounds per game. Those are superstar numbers. Unfortunately, he played during a weird period between generations. He wasn't part of the Russell era, and he wasn't part of the Magic and Bird era. As a result, Haywood often gets lost in the middle of NBA history, despite being one of the most important players ever. Gus Williams. When people talk about the greatest point guards of all time, Gus Williams almost never gets mentioned, and that's a shame, because during the late 1970s and early 1980s, he was one of the most exciting guards in basketball. Nicknamed the Wizard, Williams was lightning fast and nearly impossible to stay in front of. His greatest accomplishment came in 1979, when he helped lead the Seattle Supersonics to the only NBA championship in franchise history. 2 years later, he averaged 23.4 points per game and finished second in the league in scoring. Think about that. A point guard averaging over 23 points per game in an era that was much slower and more physical than today's NBA. That's incredibly impressive. The biggest reason fans forget about Williams is because Seattle no longer has an NBA team. Many younger fans simply don't know enough about the Supersonics era, and unfortunately that causes players like Gus Williams to get overlooked despite having Hall of Fame level accomplishments. Walter Davis. Walter Davis was one of the smoothest scorers basketball has ever seen. If you watched him play, everything looked effortless. The jump shot, the drives, the footwork, the athleticism, it all looked easy. Davis was the 1978 Rookie of the Year, a 6-time All-Star, and spent years as one of the NBA's most dangerous offensive players. At one point, he became the all-time leading scorer in Phoenix Suns history, before later being passed by other franchise legends. The reason Davis gets forgotten is simple. His career happened during a period dominated by Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Julius Erving, Moses Malone, and eventually Michael Jordan. When that many all-time greats are around, some incredible players inevitably get overshadowed, but make no mistake. For over a decade, Walter Davis was one of the most feared scorers in basketball. If he played in today's social media era, his highlights would be everywhere. If you made it this far, comment, what NBA legend did I miss in this video too?